Och jag ska börja direkt här med att byta språk. För först ut ikväll är Robert Harris. We're very happy to have you with us, Robert. Can you hear me and see me here?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear a lot of things, but I can hear you as well.
Okay, excellent. So where are you located right now? Where are we talking to you from?
I'm in London.
In London. Excellent. Before we start, I thought I would give the audience here at the Swedish Crime Festival in Sundsvall a brief introduction to you as a crime writer. So Robert Harris, he started out as a journalist, but in 1992 he published his first historical thriller, in Swedish called Vedergällning. And this novel was an instant international success. And by now he has published 14 thrillers of different kinds, most of them with different historical settings, and often he lets the historical events have alternate outcomes, and he combines them with fictional events. And many of the books have also been made into films and television series, and I believe all but one has been translated into Swedish. The most recent book, V2, which is the one we have here, in Swedish translated as Vedergällning. And the title, maybe we should explain the English title, V2. It refers to the world's first long-range guided ballistic missile. I don't know why they didn't want to use that in the Swedish title. But anyway, this novel is set in Belgium in 1944, at the end of World War II. And the two main characters is a German missile engineer called Rudi Graf. He is in charge of sending the missiles towards London. And then we have Caton Walsh, who is sent to Belgium in order to locate where the missiles are sent from. So, when reading about you and when reading your novels, it's clear that you have a very strong interest in history, and also particularly in the question of what if, and trying out these alternative outcomes in history. Where does your history interest originate, and why this fascination with the what if?
Well, I've always been interested in history right from when I was a boy. For me, the past is as interesting, indeed often more interesting than the present. And I think we can learn so much from it. It's full of great stories. And there are other reasons why, as a novelist, I'm drawn to it. I like inhabiting real worlds and you know, the research and the sense that it might have been something like that. For me, you know, the sense of atmosphere, and there are things you can do with as an imaginative writer, as a fiction writer with history, that scholars, historians cannot do because they can't speculate. But I can get inside someone's head, and the moment you do that, you open up a world for a reader. If you're experiencing human sympathy, and you go into the world with characters you are interested in and believe in, then history can come alive if you're fortunate. So for me, that's the justification for what I do.
I think we're going to get back to your characters, because you have two really interesting protagonists in this novel. But can you tell us a little bit about the historical background of the novel V2, and why you decided to write specifically about this context with Belgium and the missiles?
Well, about 5 years ago, I am an avid reader of obituaries. I don't know if you know in Swedish, you know, the articles about people who've just died. The older I get, the more interested I am in this. And there was a very good one 5 years ago of a woman who died at the age of 96, called Eileen Younghusband. And it said in this obituary that she had been sent to Belgium as part of a secret unit of 8 women officers in November 1944. And their job was they sat in a bank vault in Mechelen, the Belgian city, and 70 miles south of the place where the V2 rockets were being launched at London. The rockets were launched from mobile trailers, so it was very difficult, if not impossible, to hit them. But they had this, because these rockets described a perfect parabolic curve in the 5 minutes it took them to launch and then hit London. You found a spot where they hit London and you had a radar view of the missile taking off. You could work backwards, in theory, to the point where it was launched in the woods near The Hague. And so she was part of a unit that had 6 minutes to make the calculations using slide rules and relay it to the RAF, who would then send planes over within 30 minutes to strike these launch sites before the Germans could dismantle them. So I read that and I thought, this is a fantastic character. I'd never heard of this. So that was the starting point. And then, of course, I needed an antagonist or a protagonist on the other side who was actually launching these rockets. And so that was how the novel came about, with these two characters set over a few days. One does something and it impacts on the other, and so on. So that was the structure of the book. You know, I had to write it during lockdown, which wasn't easy, which we had in Britain. You know, it's a very tight book, and I think that the circumstances under which it was written show in the book.
As you said, just as important as the historical context in your novel is that they're very character-driven, and in order to care about the context, you let us care about the characters and their lives and their turmoils. Could you tell us a little bit about Rudy and Kay and the main characters here? Who are they?
Well, they are... Kay, to take Kay first, is totally different to Eileen Younghusband. I've given him, indeed, a different job. There was a very big English country house where they processed millions and millions of photographs taken from high up, 40,000 feet or more, of German installations throughout the war. And these pictures had to be photo interpreted and what was going on. And this place at Medmenham in Berkshire was where they discovered that the Germans were building these V2 rockets. So Kay, that is her background. She's at Cambridge, and then she's recruited into this intelligence job, and that's where she comes from, and she's in her mid-20s. Rudy is an engineer, and he's very much based on a kind of composite of the young idealistic engineers that gathered around Wernher von Braun around 1930. They were kids, basically, teenagers playing with rockets. But it coincided with the Germans wanting to rearm, and suddenly huge amounts of money were poured in. And so he is a character who starts off idealistic and then finds, instead of developing a space rocket, he's developing a missile to hit London. And he ultimately is attached to the military units that are firing these at London. And so, you know, these two characters are both slightly out of sympathy with their own worlds. You know, I enjoyed creating both of them very much.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant thing to do, to make him the guy who has to launch these rockets, and already from the beginning we see he's hesitant and he's not really happy with the situation, and that makes him very sympathetic already from the start, I think. So you write all these historical thrillers, but do you read other historical crime fiction too?
To be honest, I don't do very much. I mean, I've got into a habit of writing quite a lot, and I keep switching periods. I'm writing a novel set in the 17th century now, with the result that I have to do quite a lot of reading for whatever I'm actually moved on to do. And I'm particularly obsessed with diaries and letters, things that are written by people with no hindsight. You know, they're written in the moment, and that's my chief fascination. But of course, I do read historical fiction. But I can't say that I do read it a lot.
No, you don't have any favorites to recommend to us.
No, not really.
No.
And, obviously, Robert Graves' Claudius novels, Roman novels, are very good. I read a lot of 20th century fiction, actually, rather than current fiction.
Yesterday we talked to Alexander McCall Smith about his new detective series, which is set in Malmö, Sweden, which is surprising to many people. And he talked about his fascination with this Nordic crime fiction. Do you have any periods or any events or anything in Swedish or Nordic history that you think would be interesting to build into some of your novels?
Not something that I have come across lately. I am attracted, though. I am very hooked on Scandi noir, as we call it over here. I've just finished watching a series, Icelandic, I think, called Valhalla Murders. I don't know whether you remember that, which is very good. And so I like the mise en scène of the snow and the slush and the dark, and it lends itself, rather like Victorian London and Sherlock Holmes, it lends itself perfectly to crime.
Yeah.
So I would love to write a crime story set in Scandinavia, maybe in Sweden. I think it would be a great thing to do. It's a wonderful location, and actually location is very important to me in a book. I like to really physically feel a place and see my characters walking along the roads, through the woods. I mean, with V2, because of lockdown, I only got one brief visit to Scheveningen, the place near Hague where they launched from. And I went on a filthy, wet Saturday, and the rain was coming in off the Baltic, and it was vile, horrible weather. The North Sea, sorry, not the Baltic. And I just thought, this is great. This is what I want.
Perfect.
I want rockets launched from these drenched woods.
I know we have a lot of people in the audience here who are aspiring writers. And do you have any recommendations or any writing tips that you could share with us?
Well, I think the main thing is that writing is something it's very easy to dream of doing and to play around with and never actually settle to. And so the main thing I would say is you can't just write a sentence or a paragraph or a page. You've got to write 200 or 300 pages. That's the first thing. So you've got to have some courage and some stamina and strength to do that. But that is the task. There's no point being a dilettante about it. You have to go for it. And the greatest tip I had when I started writing novels for Fatherland was to know your ending. I mean, you wouldn't start telling a joke without knowing the punchline, really. And it's the same if you're telling a story. A story is something that's already happened in the past, and you are coming along to describe what has happened. So you should know what it is that has happened. And make a plan of what the book is like. And by all means, depart from it. You will. The book is organic. It grows and changes. But I would always recommend knowing the structure of a book so that characters are doing things all the time that are relevant to the story.
Yeah, this sounds like a very good recommendation. Which part of the writing process is your favorite part?
Favorite part is probably when I put the final full stop at the end of the book. No, I like all aspects of it. I like the research, which is itself, the lived experience. I've never hired a researcher. I do all my own research. I like then the actual thinking of the characters inspired by the research and what they will do, and writing out the kind of architect's plan of what the book will be like. And then I quite like the business of having to write 800 words a day, getting through it, hopefully each day having a fresh idea, so you surprise yourself. I work only in the mornings, really, because I think you can only write about 4 or 5 hours a day without. You begin to lose your energy, and actually you'll find that what you're doing has to be thrown away the next day. So I think it's best to just do 4 or 5 hours. And yeah, I enjoy it. It's been a great privilege to be a writer. I wouldn't have wanted to do anything else with my life at all.
I think our time is almost up here, but could you reveal something to us about the new book that you're working on right now?
Yes, again, it's a different period for me. It's something in English history. You may know that the King, Charles I, Cromwell had him executed. But after Cromwell's death, Charles II, Charles's son, came to the throne after the English Civil War. And an Act of Parliament was passed called the Act of Oblivion, which is the title of the novel. And this was to, like Truth and Reconciliation, this was to cancel the Civil War, except for one group of people. That was anyone who'd been involved in the killing of Charles I, whether they sat as a judge or signed the death warrant. And this became the biggest manhunt of the 17th century. They went after all of these people. Those they caught, most of them were executed. Some of them lived on the run for 15, 20 years. And the novel follows 2 men, a father-in-law and a son-in-law, who fled from England to America and lived going from place to place, hiding in attics, being constantly pursued. And so for me, this is both a chase story, but also a way of examining, the Civil War and the issues that were raised in it.
Well, thank you so much. We hope we'll get to see that book out in Swedish in the next year here or so, hopefully. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. A big round of applause for Robert Harris.
Thank you. A pleasure.
Svenska mycket långsamt, eller jag förstår inte.